Thank you for tuning in for another episode of SwitchMed Connect. Earlier in the series, we have been exploring the role of green entrepreneurs to stimulate the sustainable development in the Mediterranean region. We got to hear how small and medium-sized businesses are, in fact, breaking out of this traditional linear business model, and we're beginning to imagine the possibilities if these businesses, which make up about 90% of the GDP in the Mediterranean, were able to make the switch and truly become green and circular and sustainable businesses. This is actually a chance to address some very important global challenges such as poverty, pollution, global greenhouse gas emissions. A number of things can be addressed when we make this transition. So, who wouldn't want to realize these opportunities and really deliver shared benefits locally and regionally and globally? This episode is dedicated to the key to unlocking the potential of a circular economy, which is sustainable finance. And we want to ask now how we can properly fund and support the entrepreneurs who can actually create and sustain a circular economy. The SwitchMed program has been actively pursuing the answers to these big questions. And our guests today are friends of the program and the right people to have in the conversation with us. So thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it. We have joining us from Brussels, Daniel Sorrosal, who is the Secretary General at FEBEA, which is the European Federation of Ethical and Alternative Banks and Financiers. And Daniel has been part of the SwitchMed process and program, specifically in helping to deliver the launch of some new upcoming tools. And that's the Switchers Fund, the Mediterranean Observatory on Sustainable Finance. And your work, I understand, focuses on promoting ethical finance in Europe towards an ecological transition and development of the social economy as a democratic tool to mobilize people and build an inclusive and environmentally friendly society, which is what we need. So that's an amazing thing. Thank you for coming and being part of this.
Thank you.
And we have joining us from Beirut, Michelle Mouracade. Thank you for joining us from Beirut. You have been were Alfanar's country director for Lebanon, now the head of investor relations, impact, and operations for Anara Impact Capital. And Michelle has 27 years of experience in strategy, organization, social entrepreneurship, all across different various sectors and regions. And as I understand, Michelle, you were for 20 years living abroad and focusing more in the private sector, and now you've returned to Lebanon and joined Alfanar, which is actually the first venture philanthropy organization in the Arab world to provide funding, management support, training, and mentorship to social enterprises. So now you're spearheading Alfanar's effort to launch the first regional impact investment fund of the Middle East and North Africa. So that's an incredible, wonderful contribution. We're very pleased to have you both here with us today. I want to start with something that I think is really important, which is about translating the transition. I think that we hear a lot about the need to make a transition to a low-carbon, green, circular, sustainable economy, but we need to make sure that everybody understands what that actually means. One of the things that we can do to help translate that is to understand who is involved in this transition, and especially when it comes to sustainable finance. So when we want to talk about sustainable finance in this transition, who do we need to actually speak to actually make sure that they're understanding? And we have the entrepreneurs, obviously, themselves, but we also have business support organizations, financiers. There's other people involved that are ideally that are empowered and working at their full capacity. And so, Daniel, I thought you could help us start off by looking at how we are going to unlock this sustainable finance challenge or opportunity, rather. And you could share with us some of your ideas about who needs to be supported in order for that to happen, and particularly how we build capacity almost from the top down so that the banks and the financiers know how to deliver sustainable finance. Little question.
Little question. I think you could probably write a doctorate on it. But for me, when I look at Michelle and I hear what you said about her, I think this is the ideal outcome. But this cannot be an isolated case. When we started working with SwitchMed, must have been 2016. We were kind of called in to support a little bit in a role of as a financial advisor kind of thing. And the focus at the time was to somehow try to get European funding to support these entrepreneurs, so these green entrepreneurs, these innovators in the Mediterranean. And at the time, we raised the question, I said, but why does it have to be European funding? I mean, why? It doesn't really make sense, no? That if you're a Lebanese entrepreneur, somebody from Germany is going to support your project. So the first question we raised is like, okay, let's look at what is out there already. So we went visiting not all the countries, but a number of the countries, and talking to venture capitalists, bankers, foundations, some sort of state programs and that provide guarantees or some sort of finance, trying to map the opportunities that were already there, even if they were not necessarily designed for this purpose, they were there. This is the basic infrastructure that you need. None of them were particularly, would have considered themselves working in sustainable finance. But I'm talking 2016. So at the time, nobody would have talked about sustainable finance. And the surprising fact is that they were all interested. They were all interested for a number of reasons. Basically because they know that youth in the Mediterranean is sometimes struggling to succeed in life, and the opportunities as this entrepreneurial spirit can bring are important for the youth, for them as future clients, for the societies, etc., etc. So the uptake was actually pretty good. Of course, the basic infrastructure wasn't there, and probably is not there yet, but but we have moved a mountain, I would say, in the meantime, in the sense that many of the people that just looked at us as a kind of romantic Europeans trying to sell them a story that worked in Europe started to see, well, actually, this could also happen here. Because to be honest, in my work in Brussels with my European members, we are a membership organization, sometimes we struggle to find the right entrepreneurs. I mean, there are, but when you go to Lebanon, there are a lot more. You see? You just have to pay attention to them, to create a product for them, to create something that will connect your job and, let's say, their purpose. And I think in that sense, besides the fact that we have to continue to promote entrepreneurship and to support innovators and to help people with big and new ideas succeed, we also have to help the infrastructure out there to come 1, 2, or 3 steps towards these people. Because, of course, if it's not in the procedures, they cannot do it. If they don't have the right product for it, they cannot do it. If they've never seen it before, they cannot do it. If they don't have something to refer to, they cannot do it. So I think, in the end, we would need Alfanar as an example that it can be done, and others to actually make the jump. Start realizing that financing a green entrepreneur probably is a better proposition even from a business perspective than financing any kind of entrepreneur, maybe much more linked to fossil fuels or a traditional economy. But this mind switch needs to be accompanied. It's a process. I don't think we're at the end of the process, probably somewhere between the beginning and the middle. But I think we have moved since 2016 for sure. And I think the fact that many of the people who at the time looked at it with, curiosity are starting to take steps towards it. However incomplete those steps may be, that's already progress.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is really important, is that what works better than any idea is evidence. once we see that there is success, which, is happening and the progress is happening, we know the transformation is not somewhere off in the distance or in the future. It's actually, we're inside of the transformation right now. We're starting to see what does work. And so I think that's really helpful to continue to add to that so that more financiers, more banks, more funding entities can see that this does provide, in addition to their interests, that they actually see that it's working. And Michelle, I was wondering if you could kind of help us with your experience and your views to better understand now how entrepreneurs can position themselves to be able to access sustainable finance when it is available.
Sure. So, first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm very glad to meet Daniel as well. To answer your question about what entrepreneurs could do to be better positioned to receive funding, basically, as you mentioned, at Alfanar, our mission is to provide funding, training, mentorship, management support, and access to networks and markets to both social and green entrepreneurs. So we support them in different ways at different stages of their development. But no matter what stage they're at, there are certain prerequisites that are essential for them to be able to access financing, and that we believe green entrepreneurs should focus on to become investment ready. In fact, during our seed cycles and our sustain cycles, we help build their capacities in that way. So I'm going to give you an example of a few of these prerequisites that we and that other investors look for. First, one of the most important things is that entrepreneurs need to demonstrate the economic viability and sustainability of their venture. So they need to show that they have a strong business plan with financial projections that are based on real data. They also need to demonstrate that their solution is solving a real problem and has a large addressable market. So they need to have tested this solution, proven the product market fit, demonstrated that there's organic traction, and that their business model is scalable, because nobody will invest in a business model that is not scalable. Another very important thing that we look at specifically at Alfanar, and that we actually support them in putting in place, is impact management. Green entrepreneurs should learn how to model, measure, and communicate both their environmental and social impact. And this is crucial not only to attract impact investors, but it also helps them scale their business, because studies have shown that when consumers are faced with two products of equal quality, 90% of the time they will select the product that has a measurable social and or environmental impact. So those are some of the things that entrepreneurs can do to become investment ready and to attract funding.
Thank you for sharing that, Michelle. It's really helpful. I think that sort of what we're drawing from both of your perspectives is communicating, sort of being able to deliver the examples and the information that is necessary for the other stakeholder to feel comfortable or confident. And obviously that involves building trust. And that's sort of another area that I think we need to look at when we consider this transition that we're all hoping for, is building trust. And there's a resource that I want to highlight, and for our listeners, we'll put a link in our show notes. This was a collaboration between FEBEA and MedWaves, which is the good practices to support sustainable finance for green businesses in the Mediterranean. And this is a study that actually focused on sustainable finance as a tool to be able to support sustainable enterprises, and how this advances what we're really looking for, which is the social and environmental solutions. So really getting now into the impact, which is leads me to my next question, and that's about trying to understand how we can make these important impacts through financing green entrepreneurs, sustainable businesses, etc. And this is how we're going to be able to really work locally and regionally to deliver to the global goals that we all know are important. So, Michelle, I want to turn back to you. we know that in the Middle East and in North Africa region, or the MENA region, there's been a shift, right? So there's more interest now than there ever has been in businesses with a social purpose. So I want to ask you to kind of reflect a bit about that shift and how you feel that there's been inspiration or ways in which you can draw from other regions or outside of the region to really support that type of transition.
Sure. So to explain a bit how that shift is happening, I'm sure you know, and Daniel's seen it when he's been to the region, there's billions of dollars that are being spent in the MENA region on humanitarian aid and on traditional development programs. Unfortunately, we have found that the way this money is spent is very costly short-term solutions, and it's fueling cycles of dependency, and it's not really breaking the cycle of poverty. Today, the MENA region is one of the only regions in the world where poverty rates have consistently increased every year since 2014. And the statistics are horrendous. So youth unemployment, for example, has been the highest in the world for 25 years. More than 50% of children in MENA suffer from learning poverty, meaning that they cannot read and understand an age-appropriate text by age 10. MENA also has the lowest rate of women's participation in the labor force, with an average of 27% of women employed. So this means it's an unemployment rate for women that is 80% higher than men. And in terms of climate change, the temperatures in the MENA region are increasing twice as fast as the global average due to the climate crisis. So what we believe at Alfanar, and what our peers are seeing, and what SwitchMed Connect has been able to do, is to change the approach and to address the growing social challenges in a different way. So we've been advocating for the past 20 years for a paradigm shift from short-term solutions to long-term solutions that are innovative and sustainable, and that place the disadvantaged communities, especially women and youth, on the pathway to becoming self-reliant through social entrepreneurship. So instead of relying too much on donor funding, social enterprises are becoming less reliant and financially sustainable so that they can multiply their impact over the long term. And obviously, the MENA region can learn a lot from Europe. Europe has one of the most developed social enterprise ecosystem. So for instance, some of the things we've done at Alfanar to support the learnings from Europe is we've introduced the Lebanese Social Enterprise Network, LSC, to Social Enterprise UK. SwitchMed also has encouraged the launch of an EcoSwitch coalition that organizes events to create networking opportunities amongst green entrepreneurs. All these things are helping entrepreneurs from the MENA region learn from Europe. But I have to say that those are all very timid, small steps, and we have to do more. If we really want to grow the social enterprise and the impact investment sector in the MENA region, we absolutely need to attract impact investor funding to the region. Today, less than 1% of the $1.16 trillion of impact investment funding are coming to the MENA region. And one of the reasons for that is because there are nearly no impact investment funds. So we need Europeans and impact investors who understand the potential of impact investing to support the launch of these impact funds and to invest in these impact funds, such as the Anara Impact Fund that we're launching, because this is the only way to really grow the sector. The potential of impact investing has to be demonstrated in the MENA region. And there's no reason why most of the funding should go to sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and other regions. So impact investing, I really do believe, will be the best way for us to learn from Europe and to grow the sector in the region.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that perspective in. I think it's also really helpful to be more clear about what impact investing is, as well as where it needs to be delivered to deliver the impact. So that's great perspective. And Daniel, maybe you could share with us from your experience when we're talking about impact now. You've talked before in different spaces about citizen money and the power of citizen money for change and your advocacy work. Maybe you could bring that perspective into this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, as Michelle said, certainly probably Europe has one of the most sophisticated ecosystems for social entrepreneurship in the world. But at the same time, it has a lot more players in that ecosystem. When I compare, and it's not really comparable, but when I compare what I find in the MENA region, I find much more motivated and, to a certain extent, better entrepreneurs on the one side. So on the, let's say, the demand side, if you put it from the funding perspective, there's a lot out there. Well, what I do find at the same time as a lack is minimal, if not almost ridiculously small support. If I look at a country like Belgium where I live, or France or others, there's a lot more government money going into generally the promotion and the funding and the support of social entrepreneurship, because they see it as a path towards the future. If we are building an ecological and social transition, we need those entrepreneurs to actually enact the change. There's a lot more investment coming from the private sector, because the public sector can only provide a certain amount, but then sort of they pass it on to the private sector to actually fund the initiatives. There's a lot more, let's say, basic infrastructure, like places where actually entrepreneurs meet, but also places where financiers meet, which is what we do, and basically copy each other, find out how you do it and how did you address that issue. Basically, network, copy, and inspire each other. Sometimes co-invest, sometimes collaborate, and so on. And so all that infrastructure, to a certain extent, still needs to be not transposed, because this is not the way to do it. It still needs to emerge in the MENA region. And of course, we can put a very bleak picture of the MENA region, but at the same time, I think many of the problems lie in its position. It's kind of too close to Europe and too far to Europe at the same time. So on the one hand, you have a very well-educated youth who's not finding the opportunity that it should in its place. And at the same time, we still have this kind of strange relationship where we're still kind of investing aid money in countries that actually probably do not need aid money. They just need investment. Things are changing, though, and I would like to highlight the role that SwitchMed has played in this scene, because, you see, 10 years ago, whenever I went to a conference on the MENA region, you would have talked about aid or maybe microfinance. Today, this is not the case. And I think SwitchMed has changed the paradigm. We talk about a vibrant, innovative, young sector looking at the future. No aid involved. We talk about opportunity, we talk about business opportunities, we talk about changing the world. And I think that infuses a lot more confidence in those people, that they don't have to come up with some NGO scheme to get some money from a European or American donor. All of a sudden, they can stand much more in their own feet. But what I do find as lacking, and of course Europeans can play their part, is also, and the citizens' money is where it comes, is like a lot of the money that is being mobilized in support of social entrepreneurship in Europe is coming from middle-class Europeans who put their money in certain institutions on the condition that their money will go to the right place. And this is what I haven't seen a lot in the MENA region. It's like there's not much local investment going into the local economy, if you want. We expect European money to do that. I mean, I think we can mobilize money to serve as an example, but in the end, I think many of these, as much as we cannot expect Lebanese investors to come and support social entrepreneurs in Catalonia, we wouldn't necessarily need to expect the opposite. And I think it will be much more helpful to find places for financiers, let's say, from Europe and from the MENA region to collaborate. But at the same time, if we want to build anything that is lasting, it will have to emerge much more locally. And we've seen it on the demand side. There are plenty of entrepreneurs, but we are not seeing it on the supply side. I mean, the banking infrastructure probably in the MENA region is much better than in Africa. However, is failing to perform in this sector. The investment infrastructure is the same. It's very well developed for certain things, but it's failing to act on this specific sector or similar sectors. I think examples like ours, we are a European network bringing together similar types of financiers. Some are impact investors, some are banks, some are other forms of finance, into kind of one room regularly to exchange with each other. This is what I've been missing in the MENA region. SwitchMed has done a certain amount of steps towards that, but I think we need something much more of a regular meeting place on the finance side that we can also help lure some donor or government resources to actually show that there is traction also on the supply side.
I agree with Daniel that it's very important for investors from the MENA region to also support the social enterprise sector and to invest in impact funds. And that's what we're trying to encourage with the launch of our impact investment fund. However, what I found is whenever I attend conferences in Europe and I speak to impact investors in Europe, they're all investing in Africa. What we see is that the MENA investors, because they're working here, they already have their income risk in the MENA region. They need to diversify their investments away from the MENA region. So for them, it makes more sense to invest in Europe and in the US. But they also have zero experience with impact investing. Whereas Europeans, they know that impact investing generates returns and improves the situation of vulnerable communities. Basically, what I want to say is that impact investors from Europe and from the rest of the world are investing in Africa, they're investing in Asia, they're investing in Latin America, but they're not investing in the MENA region. And we need this to change, especially that Europe is affected by the socioeconomic issues in MENA with the refugee crisis and the migrants that are coming to Europe. So if we really want to solve that issue, then we need to encourage impact investing, not just in Africa and other regions, but also in MENA. And it's in that sense that I was saying that Europeans can make a difference because they know the potential of impact investing. And actually, we have amongst our investors, our committed investors for our fund, we have some Italians, we have some people from the UK that understand the importance of investing in funds in the MENA region. And obviously, we will be convincing people from the MENA region as well, but we need the ones who have already tried and tested impact investing to show the way.
I mean, this is always a bit of a chicken and egg, and I don't want to enter into a debate on this.
Yes.
But I mean, 10, 15 years ago, when the first, French or Italian or Spanish impact investors started, they were also looked as fools. People thought this is not going to work. And it's only after a while that others started to see that it actually works and it sort of brought in more interest. And I think we need more people to dare in the MENA region to actually do it. And one of the reasons why there is probably less investment in the MENA region than in others is that, but this is a much bigger question, is sometimes the legal frameworks are not ready. I know from investors in my world that they tell me if you put a euro in Egypt, it's easy to put it in, but it's impossible to get it out. It's the same thing in Tunisia. Sometimes the legal frameworks are not ready to attract investment. There's not enough, let's say, security or legal security or juridical protection. So, but probably that's a much bigger problem that we cannot solve here. But it might explain one of the reasons why. And at the same time, and this is why I was arguing about these intermediate spaces where actually people meet. I think if we brought into the same room more regularly both MENA investors and European investors, we would trigger collaborations. But sometimes these walls that live in parallel spheres. They don't necessarily talk to each other, or when they do, they kind of meet in the wrong sphere. So we have, the Lebanese investor investing in a French bank for another purpose.
Yeah, but
Even if the same French bank is maybe investing in social entrepreneurship in France. But it's different people talking about different things. What we need to get them is in the same room on the same topic to see that what you do is very similar to what I do, because that was actually my big surprise when I started visiting some of the MENA countries, is that actually the entrepreneurs that I saw were not very different from the entrepreneurs that I saw in Barcelona or in Madrid or in Rome. They were even better sometimes. But unless you go there, you don't know.
Yeah, I think that part of what we're discovering in this conversation is that there's a narrative about regions that is shifting.
Yeah.
And those narratives obviously affect the way that finance flows. And so we have to be able to work with the infrastructures and, build them in the way that functions properly and can be efficient and effective. And we also have to address these sort of larger global narratives as well at the same time. And so I think that is really interesting because the transition is not only what we can do inside, but also to encompass this larger perspective. And to that, I think what's really interesting is that there's this emergence of continuing to provide innovative solutions. And so you both are involved in some very innovative new financial tools. And I want to kind of give a chance for us to talk about that. And maybe, Daniel, you could share with us, there's going to be a new launch of a new financial tool, the Switchers Fund. And maybe you can explain why you think this particular tool could be a game changer and provide something that's really needed at the moment.
Well, this is exactly what Michelle was referring to. It was the idea was to create a tool for help Europeans invest in it, so that the fund, will actually invest in the MENA region, because they might not be able or willing to just do it on their own. So let's make their life easier and create the thing that helps them do it, but not as a. I mean, we don't want to. The point is not to compete with Alfanar for the same entrepreneurs. It's actually to bring additional money and to sort of create more of a catalytic fund, something that actually takes the first risk on something that others might not be willing to do at first. But if somebody else does, maybe they might be willing to jump second. So it's just to prove that it can be done. So it's kind of on that very pragmatic, practical approach. And we're still seeing that is not easy. But okay, that's nothing is easy in life unless you try. So that's the idea, is launching something that can actually start doing the thing to prove others that if we can do it, you can do it too.
Yeah, and I think, I think that concept of daring to sort of break things up, shake things up, create new pathways is so important. And Michelle, you're also on the brink of a launch. So maybe you could share with us a little bit about the Anara Impact Fund and sort of the intricacies of that.
So we are about to launch the first regional impact investment fund of the region. Alfanar, for the past 20 years, has been providing grant funding to social and green enterprises. And what we noticed is that we've supported many social enterprises over time, specifically 98 of them, with tailored funding and management support. 57% of the ones we supported were women-led. And they've impacted the lives of more than 430,000 women, youth, and children. We've also provided training and management support to close to 200 social enterprises. And since 2015, more than 52% of our portfolio had reached break-even and needed more significant investment funding to continue growing. So tickets of $500,000 and above. And at the same time, we were being introduced or approached by businesses with impact that were more at a growth stage than the ones where we provide grant funding to. So we saw that there was a need, there was a significant funding gap, and there was a need to launch an investment fund. At the same time, quite a few development finance institutions were approaching us and were telling us that they wanted to support the impact investment sector in the region, but they didn't see any vehicles that they could invest in. So the confluence of all these factors made us think that this is the right moment to launch an impact fund. Our fund will be a $50 million US regional fund. It's a women-led fund that will aim to deliver attractive commercial returns to investors while also maximizing a measurable and scalable social and/or environmental impact. We will be focused on gender lens investing, and we will be investing in businesses with impact that are operating in the Middle East and North Africa region. And of course, it's very important for us to also have co-investors. So we're very excited to hear about the fund that Daniel just spoke about. And we believe that we will be an interesting co-investor to have because we will be offering a very unique package to entrepreneurs through 3 pillars. There will be financing, of course, but there will also be impact management support. And this is quite unique to our fund and something that entrepreneurs really need to be able to attract impact investment funding. We will also be offering technical assistance. So we have raised funding to provide strategy and financial experts, as well as non-dilutive capital grants to entrepreneurs to help them grow their business and scale their impact. And we're hoping to launch very soon.
It's very exciting. Thank you for sharing that. I think that I want to thank you both for being able to join me today and to have this conversation, because I feel like we are talking about something that, as I said, it already is happening. It is a transformation that's happening towards a green, circular, sustainable economy. And in the process, we're continuing to innovate. And hearing about the launch of these new funds just is so exciting. And it really proves that it's possible to be inside of this transformation and continue to evolve and be innovative so that we can face the challenges and we can continue to move towards these larger global goals. So I want to thank you both for taking some time for these interesting conversations. To our listeners, I want to let you know that we have a lot of great links to some of the resources we've discussed, as well as to our guests in the show notes that you can check out. And we will look forward to listening again in the next episode of SwitchMed Connect.